A rich man ignored the beggar until his son stopped, looked back and said, "Dad, that's Mom." The morning sun reflected off his polished boots and the golden embroidery of his coat, glinting like a crown that had never been claimed. Around him, the market was alive with merchants shouting their wares, children darting between stalls, and beggars holding out worn hands. Alaric ignored them all as he always did. He had built his wealth from nothing, and nothing, least of all human need, should distract him now. Yet there was one figure he could not quite ignore. She stood at the corner of a narrow alley, wrapped in rags that had once been grand. Her hair, black as midnight, fell in tangled waves over her shoulders, hiding her face except for her eyes. Those eyes glimmered with something strange, something that made even Alaric, who had faced countless rivals and betrayals, feel a brief, unexplainable stir in his chest. But he did not stop. Pride and the lessons of his life whispered that beggars were a distraction, a threat to the perfect order he had built. Cale, his son, walked beside him, but unlike his father, he noticed the beggar every day. There was something in her stillness, something that seemed to watch and wait, not for coin but for recognition. Cale was small, barely 10, with curiosity burning in his eyes. He often whispered to his father, "Who is she, father?" And Alaric would answer, cold and dismissive, "A woman who has chosen misery over effort. Do not concern yourself with her." But Cale could not turn away. Today, as they passed, the beggar woman raised a hand. Not for alms, not for pity, but as if signaling Cale alone. The boy hesitated, glancing at his father, who was already moving ahead, eyes fixed on the grand gates of their estate. Something deep inside Cale urged him forward, an invisible thread pulling him toward her. "Wait," Cale said softly and took a step. Then another. Alaric's eyes narrowed. "Cale, come. Do not waste your time," Alaric called, but his voice lacked its usual sharpness. There was a pause in his words, a flicker, almost imperceptible, as if he too sensed something unusual about the woman. Cale stopped before her, his small hand clutching the edge of his father's coat, but his eyes never left hers. The beggar smiled faintly, but it was not joy that crossed her face. It was recognition, as if she had been waiting for him. "Hello," Cale whispered. The woman tilted her head. "Hello, little one," she said, her voice low and smooth, like wind moving through dark branches. "You see me, but he does not," Cale blinked. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly with awe. The beggar looked down at the ground as if weighing her words. "I am someone who remembers, someone who waits." She raised her eyes again, and Cale felt a warmth he could not explain. There was sadness there, deep as night, but also something protective, something fierce. Alaric, sensing the unusual stillness, turned back just in time to see Cale standing too close. "Cale," he barked, rushing forward. "Do not speak to her." The beggar's eyes flicked to Alaric. For a brief moment her gaze softened, and Cale thought he saw a flicker of pain, maybe even recognition, before she looked away. Alaric reached Cale, grabbed his arm, and pulled him along. "You will not speak to strangers, especially not." Alaric stopped himself. Words of anger died in his throat. There was something about her that unsettled him, something he could not name, and that scared him more than anything he had faced in the markets, in courts, or in the halls of his own wealth. Cale looked back once over his shoulder and caught her eyes again. She raised her hand slightly, not in greeting, but as if to say, "Wait for me." And in that moment, Cale felt it, not just curiosity, but a strange, undeniable connection. That evening, the city streets were quieter. Lanterns flickered in the mist rising from the alleys, and the scent of baked bread mixed with the sharper tang of stone and smoke. Cale could not sleep. He stared at the window of his father's study, wondering about the woman in rags. "Father," he said the next morning at breakfast, "why does she look like she knows me?" Alaric slammed his hand on the table. "Enough of this foolishness," he snapped. "A beggar knows nothing of life, Cale. You will obey me." But even as he spoke, his own voice lacked its usual certainty. Something about the beggar lingered in his mind, a shadow of memory he could not place. Cale could not obey. He found himself wandering the streets again the following day, slipping quietly past the markets and down the narrow alleys. The beggar woman was there just as before, her posture still and patient. "You came," she said softly. "You remembered." Cale nodded. "I wanted to know who you are. Why do I feel like I know you?" She studied him carefully as if testing his heart. "You know because you have not yet forgotten. But he has," she said, and Cale realized she meant his father. "He forgot everything that matters. But you have a heart that still remembers love." Cale felt a shiver run down his spine. "Love, you mean?" He hesitated, unsure what to say. "I cannot tell you everything," the beggar whispered. "Not yet, but the world is changing, little one. Dark things stir, and those who are blind to the past may lose everything. You must be careful." Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the alley, carrying with it the faintest scent of roses and smoke. Cale felt as if the air itself was alive, bending toward her presence. He reached out instinctively, but she vanished, leaving only the echoes of her voice. When Cale ran home, he found his father waiting, fuming. "Cale, where have you been? Do you know the trouble you could cause?" Cale's chest heaved. "Father, she is not just a beggar. There's something about her. I think she's important, something magical maybe. She's waiting for me." Alaric's eyes narrowed. "Magic nonsense. You are a child, Cale. You must stop dreaming." But that night Alaric could not sleep. In the quiet darkness of his chamber he thought of the woman, of the way her eyes seemed to pierce through the layers of his pride. He remembered something, a memory he had long buried, a face, a voice, a love he had thought lost to time. And for the first time in years he felt fear, fear of what he had ignored, fear of what he had lost. The next day Cale again slipped away, following the invisible thread that seemed to connect him to the woman. He found her at the same corner waiting, but something was different. She looked older, wearier, and yet there was a strength in her posture that spoke of hidden power. "Little one," she said, her voice tinged with sorrow, "you should not have come. The world is dangerous for those who reach too far, but since you are here, listen carefully. There are things about your father, things you must understand before it is too late." Cale's eyes widened. "What do you mean? What has father done?" She shook her head. "He does not remember me, not fully, not yet, but you carry the key to what was lost. You must choose, will you help him remember, or will the past remain buried forever?" Cale swallowed hard. I want him to remember. I want to know who you are. I want to know why you are important to us." The beggar looked at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You are brave, little one, but bravery alone is not enough. There are forces in the shadows that would see this city fall and our past lost again. You must be careful. Your father, he may not be ready, and I may not be able to stay, but I will try." As Cale reached out to her, a sudden shadow passed over the alley. A chill ran down his spine, and he realized he was not alone. Something unseen, something dark, had noticed them. The woman's hand pressed against his chest, steadying him. "Remember this, little one," she whispered. "What is lost can be found, but sometimes at a cost that cannot be measured." Cale nodded, feeling both fear and a fierce resolve. And then, before he could speak again, she vanished into the mist, leaving him standing alone in the alley. The sun broke through the clouds, but the city seemed darker somehow, as if the shadows themselves were alive. Cale ran home, his heart pounding, and looked back once more. The alley was empty, but he could still feel her gaze on him. And then he whispered, almost to himself, "I'll find you and I'll make him see. I'll make him remember." Little did he know, the beggar woman had already seen him, had already seen the spark of hope and love that could change everything. And in the distance, a figure watched from the rooftops, cloaked in shadow, as if the city itself waited to see if the boy could awaken what had been lost. And then Cale's voice, small but firm, cut through the silence. "Father, that is Mom." The words hung in the air, heavy with mystery, longing, and the first tremor of a story that would change everything. The day after Cale recognized the beggar woman, the city felt different. Even the streets that were always alive with noise seemed quieter, as if holding its breath. Cale could not focus on lessons, on chores, or on the endless counting of coins that his father demanded in his mercantile empire. His thoughts were filled with her, the woman in rags, whose eyes had glimmered like the night sky, whose voice had spoken of things he did not yet understand. Alaric, meanwhile, felt a strange emptiness gnawing at him. He tried to dismiss it, calling it fatigue or stress, but each time he closed his eyes he saw her face, fleeting, ghost-like, yet sharp with memory. He could not remember when she had disappeared or why, but the pull of her presence was undeniable. Pride made him resist, but a deeper, older fear whispered that the beggar woman, his lost wife, though he could not name her yet, was more than she seemed. Cale decided he could not wait for answers. That morning he slipped quietly from the grand estate, weaving through narrow alleys, past the open market where vendors shouted their wares and children chased stray cats. The air smelled of fresh bread, smoke, and something strange, something sweet and metallic that made his head spin for a moment. He found her where she always was, leaning against the wall at the edge of a shadowed alley. "You came again," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of hidden worlds. "I was not sure you would." "I had to," Cale said, stepping closer. "I have to know why you are here, who you really are." She looked at him, her eyes narrowing slightly as if measuring his courage. "Some things are not safe to know. Some truths can change the way a child sees the world forever. Are you ready for that?" Cale nodded firmly, though his hands trembled. "I am ready. I want to help. I want Father to remember." Her gaze softened. "Then you must listen carefully." She lowered her voice even more. "Long ago, before the city had walls, before the wealth of your father's house was built, there was a bond between two hearts that should never have been broken. Your father made a choice that tore us apart, and I was cursed, banished, forced to live unseen, to walk among shadows and memories." Cale felt a lump in his throat. "Cursed, banished," she nodded. "Yes, the curse was not only mine, but it binds your father too. He does not remember me, not fully. The world erased what we had, but the bond remains. You are the bridge. You carry the memory that can awaken him." Cale swallowed hard. "But how can I do that?" The beggar woman reached out a hand, and for the first time, Cale noticed the faint glow around her fingers like silver smoke. "By showing him the truth, by reminding him of what was lost and what can still be found. But you must be careful. There are others who watch, who do not want this truth to return. The city, it is full of shadows that move like men, waiting for moments of weakness." A shiver ran down Cale's spine. "Shadows? What do you mean?" "Some things are better not named," she said, turning her face away, but her voice carried urgency. "I can teach you, little one. I can guide you, but the first lesson is this: the heart remembers what the mind forgets. You must trust your own feelings, even when all else tells you not to." Cale nodded again. His mind was spinning, but he felt a strange clarity. He had always felt there was more to the beggar woman than met the eye. Now he understood why. At that moment, a soft rustle came from the far end of the alley. Cale froze. The woman's eyes flicked to the sound. "Go," she whispered. "Hide." Cale pressed himself against the cold wall, heart pounding. From the shadows, a figure emerged, tall and silent, with eyes that seemed to drink the light. He did not move like an ordinary man. There was something wrong with his presence, as if the shadows themselves had taken form. The beggar woman's hand shot up. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through Cale's chest. The figure stopped, hesitation flickering in the darkness before retreating back into the shadows. "You see," she said quietly, releasing a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "They are watching. They know what is stirring, and if your father remains blind, the danger will only grow." Cale's small hand brushed hers instinctively. "But what can I do?" "Listen," she said. "Watch, learn, and when the time comes you will speak the truth that cannot be hidden." Kale nodded. He wanted to ask more, to know her story, to know why she had vanished, to know why the city itself seemed to bend toward her presence. But the danger was real, and the boy's courage was tested as never before. The days that followed were filled with secret meetings. Kale returned to the alley each morning, and each time the beggar woman shared fragments of her past, stories of love, betrayal, and power. She spoke of the city before it had walls, of families who wielded magic like a weapon, and of a curse that had erased her from her own life. Each tale seemed to breathe life into Kale's understanding, yet left him with more questions than answers. One afternoon, Kale noticed something unusual. The beggar woman had begun leaving faint symbols on the walls of the alley, lines and shapes that glowed faintly when touched by sunlight. "What are those?" Kale asked, curiosity piqued. "They are protection," she said. "Signs to keep others from seeing us, from following us. Not all eyes are kind and not all hearts are true." Kale traced one of the symbols with his finger. A faint warmth spread through his hand. He gasped. "It feels alive." "Good," she said with a faint smile. "It must feel alive. Only what is alive can protect. Only what is alive can remember." Kale's days grew more complicated. He had to navigate lessons with tutors, errands for his father, and the hidden world that seemed to pulse with unseen life. Yet each time he returned to the alley, the beggar woman greeted him as though he had been gone for years. There was a bond forming, something unspoken and deep, a connection that transcended ordinary words. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the city in orange and violet, Kale saw her pause in the alley. Her eyes were wide, and for the first time fear touched her usually calm demeanor. "They are close," she whispered, "and not all of them are human. You must leave soon, Kale. Your father, he cannot see them yet, but they know, and if they find you first, the bond may be lost forever." Kale felt panic rise in his chest. "I can't leave. I have to know the truth. I have to help Father remember." She placed her hand on his shoulder, steady and warm. "And you will, but patience is as important as courage. Trust the threads that bind us." At that moment, a shadow fell over the alley, and Kale realized he had been followed. The figure was human this time, tall, cloaked, and silent. Its face was hidden in darkness. The beggar woman's eyes glimmered, and she moved closer to Kale, protective. "Run," she whispered, her voice firm, yet trembling slightly. Kale's legs moved almost on their own. He turned, sprinting through the twisting alleys, heart pounding. Behind him, he heard the soft, deliberate footsteps of the cloaked figure. The city seemed to shift around him, shadows stretching and bending, the walls whispering with life. Kale ducked into a narrow passage, holding his breath. The figure paused. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rang, but its sound was distorted, as though the air itself carried warning. He pressed his back to the wall, eyes wide. And then from behind, a low hum filled the air, soft, melodic, but powerful. The beggar woman stepped into view, her figure glowing faintly in the dim light. "They will not touch you while I am here," she said. "But remember, Kale, the danger is only beginning. The city is alive, and it watches those who forget the past. Your father must awaken before it is too late." Kale looked at her, eyes shining with determination. "I will not let them take you. I will make Father see. I promise." The beggar woman nodded. "Good. But you must also promise to be patient, to be brave, and to trust what your heart remembers." Kale swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the future pressing on him. "I promise." As the sun disappeared behind the city walls, the alley grew darker, and the hum of the unseen watchers faded into silence. Kale knew this was only the beginning. The threads of past, present, and magic were weaving together, and soon all would be revealed. And in that moment, Kale understood something deep and unshakable. The beggar woman, his mother, was waiting not just for him, but for the father who had once turned away. And he would make sure that when the time came, Alaric would see the truth, or the city itself would be lost to shadow. Cliffhanger. As Kale and the beggar woman disappeared into the twisting alleys, the cloaked figure watched from the rooftops. Its eyes glimmered with a cold light. Somewhere in the city, the past stirred, preparing to challenge the future, and Kale realized that the danger was closer than ever. The night was thick with mist, curling around the city like a living thing. Lanterns flickered in the streets, casting long, trembling shadows that seemed to move on their own. Kale ran silently, the memory of the cloaked figure's cold gaze etched into his mind. Behind him, the alleyways whispered secrets he could not yet understand. But he was not afraid, not entirely. He had the beggar woman with him, and her presence was both a shield and a guide. They came to a hidden courtyard, far from the streets where merchants and nobles moved freely. The courtyard was overgrown with ivy and wild flowers, a place untouched by time and wealth. In the center stood a small, broken fountain, its water still and dark. The beggar woman knelt beside it, placing her hands over the surface. A faint glow rippled outward, and Kale gasped as the water shimmered, revealing shapes that seemed to float beneath the surface, memories of a life long forgotten. "You must see," she whispered. "The truth is not in words alone." Kale leaned closer, his eyes widening. The shapes coalesced into a scene he had never known, a younger version of the woman in rags, laughing in a sunlit garden. And beside her, a man, tall, strong, with the same stern eyes as his father, reached for her hand. But something dark loomed above them, twisting the edges of the memory. The man's hand pulled away, fear and pride holding him back. And then she was gone, falling into shadows, screaming silently as the light faded. Kale's breath caught. That's you. That's Mom." The beggar woman nodded, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Yes, I was her. I am her. And your father, he was meant to stay, to protect me, to love me. But he forgot. The curse took him from me, made him blind to my presence. He does not remember, not fully. And yet the bond remains." Kale's heart ached for both of them. "But why did this happen? Why did you disappear?" She turned to him, her eyes fierce and sad. "Because pride and fear are powerful. Your father made a choice to protect his world, to build his wealth, and in doing so, he let the wrong things take hold. I was cursed by those who feared the love we shared, by those who wanted the city's power for themselves. They erased me from his memory, but not from his heart, not from yours. You are the key to undoing it." Kale looked down at his hands, unsure what to do with such a weight. "How can I help him remember? You must awaken the memory with truth, with love, and with courage." "But you are not alone," she said, gesturing around the courtyard. The ivy rustled and faint lights appeared, hovering like tiny stars. "These are the guardians of the bond. They have waited for the right moment to act." Kale stepped back, awed. "Guardians? They are spirits of the past, of the love your father and I shared. They have protected the bond through centuries, and now they have chosen you to carry it forward." Before Kale could respond, a cold wind swept through the courtyard. The cloaked figure from before appeared at the edge, stepping silently over the stones. Its eyes glowed faintly, and Kale felt a chill that ran to his bones. "They are here," the beggar woman said, her voice tense. "The ones who cursed me. They will not let this memory awaken easily." The figure spoke, its voice low and sharp. "The child has found you. The bond is stirring. You cannot escape the judgment that awaits, woman." "You will not touch him," she replied, her hands lifting. The glow from the fountain flared, bathing the courtyard in silver light. "Leave, or face what has been waiting for centuries." The cloaked figure paused, as if considering her words. Then it vanished into the shadows, silent and threatening, leaving Kale and the woman trembling but unharmed. Kale exhaled shakily. That was dangerous. What happens now?" She placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "Now we prepare. The curse is powerful, and your father will resist at first. The memory is buried deep, protected by pride and fear. But the bond is stronger, Kale. Stronger than any shadow, stronger than any curse. and your heart can awaken it." The boy nodded, determination settling into his chest. "I will help him. I will make him see." The next day, Cale returned to the estate under the guise of ordinary errands. He watched his father from the windows, noting the way Alaric moved through the halls with confidence, yet a shadow of unease lingered in his eyes. Cale knew that beneath the pride, beneath the wealth and power, his father was already feeling the stirrings of something long forgotten. Cale slipped letters, small drawings, and trinkets into the study and the hallways, tiny reminders of love, of warmth, of a life before wealth had become the only measure. Each time he felt the bond pulsing faintly in response, a thread of magic that grew stronger with each act of care. Days passed, and the beggar woman continued to appear in the alleys, teaching Cale to sense the threads of memory and magic. She showed him how to listen to the whispers of the city, how to recognize danger before it arrived, and how to protect the bond without revealing herself fully. One evening, as Cale practiced the lessons near the fountain in the courtyard, he felt a strong presence behind him. He turned, and the woman was there, more radiant than ever, her eyes shining with both sorrow and hope. "You are ready," she said softly. "The moment is coming. Your father will face choices he has long avoided, and the bond will test him. But you, Cale, you must be the one to hold it together." Cale nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down, yet also the warmth of love guiding him. "I will not fail." The beggar woman smiled faintly. "No, you will not, but even the bravest heart can falter. And sometimes what we fear most is not the curse or the danger, but the truth we hide from ourselves." The next day, Alaric returned from his business dealings later than usual. Cale waited quietly, heart pounding. He had placed the small reminders again, hoping they would stir something in his father's memory. Alaric entered the study, and for a moment Cale noticed a flicker in his eyes, a hesitation that was unusual. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room, lingering on the small trinkets Cale had placed, an old locket, a pressed flower, a faded sketch of a garden. And then he froze. Cale's heart leapt. "Father, do you remember?" Alaric's hand shook slightly. I. He turned away, as if hiding from the truth, as if the memory clawing at his mind was too powerful to face. "I must be going out," he said, voice unsteady. But even as he spoke, Cale saw the recognition, fleeting, painful, and beautiful, spark in his father's eyes. The beggar woman appeared silently at the window, watching. Her hands glowed faintly with silver light. "It has begun," she whispered. "The bond stirs, the memory awakens, but the curse will fight, and he, your father, will resist. Be ready, Cale. Be ready for the choice that will determine everything." Cale nodded, gripping his fists. "I am ready," he whispered. That night, as the city slept under a blanket of fog, the shadows moved again. The cloaked figure returned, and this time more appeared, silent, watching, waiting for the moment when the bond would fully awaken. They were patient, knowing that the curse had long protected them. But they had underestimated Cale, the beggar woman, and the power of a heart that remembers love. The beggar woman placed her hand gently over Cale's. "When the time comes, do not falter. Speak the truth with courage. Show him what has been lost and what can still be found. The bond is stronger than fear, stronger than pride, stronger than any curse." Cale nodded, feeling the warmth of her hand seep into his chest, steadying him. He had seen the memories, he had felt the magic, and he had felt the bond. The path was dangerous, but the heart could not lie, and he would not let it. As the mist thickened around the city, a faint whisper echoed through the streets. The past stirs, the bond awakens, and soon the truth cannot be denied. Cale's eyes met the beggar woman's. "We are ready," he said firmly. She smiled faintly, yet her eyes glimmered with worry. "Almost, but not yet. The hardest part is coming. Your father must face himself, or all we have done will be for nothing." And in the distance, a shadow moved across the rooftops, silent and cold. The city itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the moment when past and present would collide. Cliffhanger. Alaric begins to stir with faint memories of the woman, but the curse is still strong. The cloaked figures plot in silence, and Kale realizes that the final confrontation is near. Will Alaric remember his true love before the curse claims her forever? The next part will reveal the ultimate struggle between memory, love, and shadow. The city slept beneath a thick blanket of mist, its streets quiet, yet alive with hidden energy. Somewhere in the alleys, whispers of the past stirred, echoing the events that had unfolded over weeks. Kale stood at the edge of the courtyard, the faint glow of the protective symbols reflecting on his face. Beside him, the beggar woman, his mother, stood tall and resolute, her eyes steady but glimmering with worry. Tonight was the night when the past would confront the present. The night when Alaric would finally face what he had buried, and the curse that had kept them apart would either break or claim everything. Kale glanced at her. "Are you ready?" he asked, voice firm despite the fear coiling in his chest. She nodded. "Almost. But remember, Kale, you must lead with your heart. Courage alone is not enough. The bond will guide you, but your father must choose to see it." Kale swallowed and took a deep breath. He had watched his father stir, small flickers of memory brushing against the edges of Alaric's mind. It was enough to give Kale hope, but he also knew the curse was strong. Time was slipping through their fingers, and the shadowy figures that had followed them still lingered in the city, waiting for a moment of weakness. The boy moved quietly through the mist, carrying with him the tokens of memory, the pressed flowers, the locket, the small sketches, that had begun to awaken a spark in his father's heart. His footsteps were silent, yet the weight of destiny pressed down on him. Every corner of the city seemed alive with anticipation, every shadow a reminder that their time was limited. At the grand estate, Alaric paced in his study, the fire casting flickering shadows across the walls. His hand trembled as he touched the locket Kale had left on his desk, a memory from a life long ago. For a moment the room seemed to shift, the walls faded, and he saw her, young and radiant, reaching for him, calling to him. He shook his head. "No, this cannot be real," he whispered. Pride, fear, and disbelief battled against the stirrings of memory. Yet deep within, a part of him, a part he had long buried, recognized her. Recognized the bond he had once shared, the love that had been stolen from him by shadows and fear. Kale entered the room quietly, holding his breath. He watched his father, the stern and proud man, tremble before the fragments of memory he had left behind. "Father," Kale said softly. Alaric turned sharply, eyes wide with confusion. "Kale, what are you doing here?" "I'm here to help you remember," Kale said firmly, holding out the small locket. I want you to see her. I want you to see Mom." The word hit Alaric like a bolt of lightning. The room seemed to tilt, the firelight dancing across the walls like flames of memory. "Mom," he whispered, voice breaking. He sank into a chair, gripping the locket tightly. The years of pride, of denial, of wealth built to protect himself, all of it seemed meaningless now, except for the truth he could no longer ignore. At that moment, the beggar woman appeared in the doorway, her eyes glistening. She no longer seemed ragged or diminished by years of wandering in shadow. Her aura radiated warmth and power, and Alaric felt a tug in his heart he could not resist. "Elowen," he breathed, the name feeling strange on his lips, yet familiar, like a song long forgotten. "Is it really you?" She stepped closer, her gaze steady but cautious. "Yes, Alaric, it is me. I have waited for you to remember, for the bond to awaken." The room seemed to hum with energy, the air thick with magic and memory. The shadows that had haunted the city, those cloaked figures that had followed Kale and her, appeared at the edges of the estate, silent but threatening. They had been waiting for this moment, hoping to prevent the reunion, to keep the curse unbroken. Kale stepped forward, placing himself between them and the figures. "You will not stop this," he said, voice trembling but strong. "We are together, and nothing can undo what is true." The beggar woman, now fully alone, raised her hands and the protective symbols flared to life. Light spread through the room, chasing the shadows into the corners. The cloaked figures hissed and vanished, unable to stand against the combined strength of the bond and the courage of a child who refused to yield. Alaric sank to his knees, tears streaming down his face. I am so sorry," he whispered, voice choked with emotion. "I forgot, I let everything else blind me." Aloan knelt beside him, placing a hand over his heart. "You did not forget completely. That is why the bond remained. That is why Kale could find me. Pride and fear may have clouded your mind, but love never truly dies." Kale watched, tears in his eyes, as his parents finally reached each other. Alaric took her hands in his, feeling the warmth and strength he had once known. The curse that had shadowed their lives seemed to shiver, then break, like ice cracking under sunlight. "I remember now," Alaric said, voice trembling but certain. "I remember everything, our love, our life, the promises I failed to keep. I remember you." Aloan smiled, tears falling freely. "And I waited for this moment, for you to see, to truly remember, to choose us again." The three embraced, the room glowing with a soft, golden light. Kale felt a warmth in his chest, a bond stronger than anything he had imagined. The past, the curse, the shadows, they were all fading, leaving only the love that had never been lost. Days passed, and the city itself seemed to breathe easier. Alaric, once hardened by wealth and pride, began to rebuild his life, balancing responsibility with love and humility. He sought forgiveness, not just from Aloan, but from the people he had ignored for so long. Aloan walked with him, her presence a steady light. She taught him patience, reminded him of the strength in compassion, and shared the quiet magic that had protected her through the years. Kale, proud and brave, watched his family unite, feeling the weight of their trials lift from his shoulders. Yet even as peace settled over their lives, a faint shimmer appeared on the horizon. The city's alleys whispered with wind, carrying the soft hum of unseen magic. It was a reminder that the world of curses and shadows was never fully gone, only tempered by love and courage. Alaric looked at Aloan, holding her hand tightly. "I will never forget again. I will never let pride blind me, and I will protect what we have rebuilt together." Aloan nodded, resting her head against his shoulder. "We are stronger now together. And whatever comes, we will face it as one." Kale, standing between them, smiled. "We did it. We made the past and present meet. We won." Aloan looked at him, eyes glistening with pride. "No, Kale, you helped us win. Your courage, your heart, it guided us through the darkness. Never forget that, little one." That night, as the city slept under a blanket of stars, the three of them stood together on the balcony of their home. The mist rolled through the streets, but it no longer held fear. Instead, it seemed alive with possibility, with hope, with the quiet magic that comes from love restored. Alaric held Aloan close, whispering her name again and again, as if saying it could anchor reality itself. Kale watched the two of them, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment, yet knowing that life would continue to test them. But for now, the curse was broken, the shadows had retreated, and the bond of family, love, was unshakable. And somewhere just beyond the city, a faint shimmer of magic flickered in the darkness. It was not threatening, not yet. It was a reminder that the world held mysteries still, but that courage, memory, and love could face whatever came. Kale looked at his parents, feeling the bond between them, the threads of past and present woven together by truth and heart. "We are ready," he whispered, and for the first time he felt completely certain of the future. Aloan smiled, resting her hand on his cheek. "Yes, Kale. Together we are ready, and nothing can ever take this from us." The city, once full of shadows, now slept peacefully. A curse had been broken, a family reunited, and hearts that had been lost to time had finally found each other again. The story of pride, loss, and love had reached its end. But the magic of the bond would endure, eternal and unbroken, a light against the darkness forevermore. Final cliffhanger closing note. Though the curse is broken and the family is reunited, the faint shimmer of magic on the horizon hints that the world beyond their city still holds mysteries. Love and courage may prevail, but the future will always hold new shadows to challenge them.